So I get a text message with a link to this site saying, "Hey, Michigan ranks number 7 in terms of freedom," and I'm like, "All right, I'll bite." So I, click on the link. Like, I don't know what this institute is, so just FYI, the way I go about anything, when someone sends me data like this, I want to know, who funds the site, who's doing the reports, and which way do they lean. It doesn't matter what you read anymore, what you watch on TV. Everything leans one way or the other, and I like to read both sides, and I want to try to form an opinion based on digesting all the information. So once I realize like which way the slant is, then you can go digest the article and say, okay, because it doesn't matter what you read. There's little bits of information you can get from both sides and then form your own opinion. So I might be pronouncing it wrong, but Cato Institute, like, who are these people? I click on it and it's, try to find some data and it says libertarian think tank. It's all right. That sounds, like someone that would do an article like this. And I see, the Koch brothers. I don't know, is it Koch? Is it Koch? I don't know how you say their name. But, they're kind of hardcore libertarians, and it's like, all right, I kind of know who's backing this thing and who's writing this thing, and it doesn't make them right or wrong. It's just that I know where their perspective is coming from. So they measure things from, it looks like fiscal, regulatory, which I'm going to do another episode later. Overall, I do feel like we just got too many laws and regulations in this country. You can't even breathe anymore. Personal, economic, which is a big one. I'll talk about that, why I choose to stay in Michigan for the most part. Lawsuit, that's always an important one. Land, marriage, education, occupational, victimless instant. All right, that's an interesting one. Health insurance. State of Michigan, you need to add car insurance on there. We rank number 50 for the highest car insurance, or at least we used to. Labor, alcohol. Alcohol's funny to me because one time I took my father fishing down in like Kentucky, and he likes to have, when I say a few pops, he wants a couple Budweisers, before he goes to bed, and we go down there and check into the hotel, and he wants to get a couple drinks, and we're in a dry county. And we end up having to drive like a half an hour to the county line. And it was crazy because as soon as you got to the county line, where the next county over was a, a wet county, there was this place you could see from 2 miles away. And it had so many lights on it. It looked like probably like I'm imagining what a strip club in the middle of the desert looks like. It had so many lights, it was ridiculous. And you had to go in there and like get your beer and then drive back to the hotel. So I can see where alcohol is an interesting one. And even in Michigan, we got like the Michigan Liquor Commission controls everything. So there's like a rare bottle of scotch I want to get. A lot of times you can't get it just on the store shelf because if it doesn't go through the Michigan Liquor Commission, I don't understand how that works, but it's irritating. Asset forfeiture, man, civil forfeiture. In a lot of cases, you go look up some of them stories. It's scary how much power the government has. It's not a good feeling. Gambling, tobacco, guns is always a hot issue. Cannabis is really big across the country right now, and people trying to get it. Unfortunately, don't quote me on this, but it's still illegal on the federal books. But more states are trying to legalize it. I look back about how many friends got jacked up where I grew up, over weed. It's the cops just jacking them up over weed and doing time for that stuff. I don't know. It's we gotta change some things in this country. A lot of people are incarcerated over some BS. Cable, I'm guessing that also counts as like internet access. Incarceration, which I kind of just tied into the cannabis, is one thing. Travel, miscellaneous, campaign finance. So that's kind of what they measure it by. How's this market here? Montana is 18, so we're number 7. So I'm guessing these are the better ones, the lighter colors. I don't know. Let's go look at the list. New Hampshire, overall, number 1. And then we got Florida. You can see where Florida with the economics and whatnot, kind of what happened towards COVID. Nevada, Tennessee, South Dakota, Indiana, Michigan. Interesting. I don't know. It's crazy. Like a lot of times, you don't ever see Michigan up there on the top of anything. Like, all of our sports suck. Like, it's I feel like every time I travel and I tell people I'm from Detroit, like everybody hates Detroit. But I think in Michigan, I'll tell you why I stay here in a minute. But my overall selection of where I live is I try to explain to somebody that I never wanted to live in a state that feels like it's a giant homeowners association. If that makes any sense to people out there listening, if you've ever lived in a homeowners association, you probably know what I mean. And I do feel like there's states that feel like a giant HOA where the government and from every form, right? The state, the county, the cities, the police, everywhere you go, you just feel like there's so many laws and so many regulations, and there's so many people telling you what you can and can't do that you can't even breathe. I don't want to live in a state like that. Now, Michigan last year during COVID felt like that. I was telling people in other states what we were dealing with here, and they couldn't believe it. Our governor went a little crazy with the lockdowns. Like, it got to the point to where you weren't even allowed, or they didn't want you out, going anywhere unless you had to like get food, or something really important. And I remember driving around feeling like a cop was about to pull me over and arrest me just for driving on the road. They wouldn't let you, if you own two homes in the state of Michigan, they wouldn't let you go from one home to the second home. You couldn't go fishing. It got to the point where it was so insane. It was scary. Like, people talk about living in like a police state or this, I don't even know how to describe it. It was a very odd feeling that I don't ever want to experience again. So I don't know how we're number 7 right now. I'm assuming this probably calculates it over a rolling 4 or 5, 6 year period. That's probably why. But last year did not feel very free. But again, back to my thought is I don't want to live in a giant HOA. I bought a condo when I was like 21, 22 years old. I dealt with the HOA almost every day. I'll never do that again. Again, if you live in an HOA, you probably know what I'm talking about. But, it's not that surprising. You're going to see. This is a giant report. Like, you can't even barely move around it without bouncing around. I think page 102 is the total list. If you end up on this website and you get the PDF, 102 is where the total list is. New York's not surprising. I thought about moving to New York many times in my life. I love New York. It's one of my favorite places to visit. I love the hustle. I love the city. I love the culture. But then I feel like I can't explain it. But when you look at laws and regulations and taxes and cost of living and real estate, I like New York. I just feel like there's better places to live. I'm looking at the top 3 here and the bottom 3, all places that are extraordinarily expensive to live. And do you want to live in a place? It's fine when you're like in the top 1% and you got money to enjoy these places. But do you want to live in a place that keeps you in an economic vice grip nonstop, where there's no upward mobility whatsoever? And I can see why, I don't know much about Hawaii. Quite a few people in California and New York, though, and laws, regulations, taxes, cost of living. Oh man, I know why you're here right now. I just feel like you want to live in a place that you feel like you have an opportunity to live a decent life, make a decent wage, not get taxed to death. You want to not be overly regulated. Like, they talk about California, it's so hard to get anything done if you're like building a house, if you're trying to add an addition. There's so much red tape, and it's like, I feel New York's probably the same way if you ever read about it. I've never built anything in New York, so I can't really comment on that. I'm just assuming. But it gets to the point where there's so much government in the way of living and trying to accomplish anything. It kind of sucks the life out of you. Like, you don't want to live like you're in a straitjacket all the time. And you can breathe, but you can only take like quarter breaths at a time. So I don't want to live like that. And I know like schools factor in, like they measure all that other stuff, but I'm not surprised by what I see on the bottom. Um, am I surprised by the top 10? I don't know much about New Hampshire. I I like Miami in Florida. Like I don't know if I want to live there. It's like New York. It's another place I'd like to visit. Nevada, I know they got the whole. I think they're big on guns and freedom and low taxes. Not a place I want to live. I got family in Tennessee. I like visiting there. Not a place I want to live. I don't think I've been to South Dakota. Can't comment. Um, Indiana, I don't. I kind of group like Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio all together. Like it's like a bunch of flat land, and we have a bunch of Cracker Barrels and big night out. You go to Cheesecake Factory. I don't know, like kind of all the same to me. I can see where Michigan and Indiana. Why is Ohio down here? I'd be curious what's the difference? I don't know, the taxes, is it poly? How are these so far apart? Um, Georgia, I mean, I can see where that one's doing well. Arizona, I mean, taxes, jobs, guns. Man, I've been to Missouri. I had family in Missouri. I don't want to go back to Missouri. No offense to anybody in Missouri, man. That was one of the most miserable trips of my life. I was probably like 15 or 16 years old, and granted, I just think it was the area we were in. But my family didn't have a lot of money, so they lived kind of on the poorer side, and just one of those trips that I want to forget. I did not enjoy Missouri. Colorado's interesting. Have an office out there. A lot of people moving out there right now. I guess you know what? That's what I'm thinking right now. What are you? What are we missing from the top 10? And it's Texas, right? Everyone's talking about people moving to Dallas, moving to Texas. Gun freedoms, lower cost of living and taxes. Like, where's Texas? Texas is 21. I'll have to look into it. I know this report's got some deeper dive stuff on this. But, man, for the state that, everyone's like California, everyone in California is moving to Texas. They're at 21. They're right down there with Alabama and Arkansas. I own a handful of recruiting companies, and there's a lot of times you're moving people around the country. And I've had people that didn't want to move to, it's either Alabama or Arkansas. I had a big client there. And the schools were so bad that we struggled to get candidates to want to relocate there. So I could see where, not just freedom, there's a lot of things that go into making decisions on where you live. It's just not guns and taxes and all this other stuff. It's, what are the schools like? What is crime like? It's, that stuff all matters. Man, but Texas at 21, so maybe Texas isn't all it's cracked up to be. Man, if you got a comment on that, drop it. Why do you think Texas at 21? Like, that's crazy. Illinois, Minnesota, Washington, Mississippi, Rhode Island. Maine. I don't know much about Maine. I want to look into that one too. Looks beautiful up there, right? Color change. Like what's living in Maine like? I'm curious. Anyways, I don't know where your state ranks. If you got a comment on your own state, drop it below, or if you think something should be higher or lower. To be honest, I'm surprised Michigan is number 7. But I feel like we have a good cost of living. You can get an apartment in a decent area without paying a fortune, and if you have a family, you can get an apartment or even some housing where the schools are reasonable. You can have some economic growth in terms of wages. Small business, wasn't that friendly last year during COVID. Overall, the state's been doing pretty well in that sense. I get to see Michigan doesn't feel like there's something to complain about every state, but I don't feel like I live in a straitjacket here. I don't feel like the laws and regulations suck the life out of you every day, or you're so like just beat down by taxes and like you can't just move with a little bit of freedom. Every state's got its ups and downs. So I guess I understand why it's, top 25, but is Michigan that good or is everywhere else that bad? That's what I have to question. Anyways, a little report that I, ends up in a text message, and I ended up turning into a 15-minute episode here. But if you got a comment on your own state, I'd be curious to, what are your complaints? Or what are your likes? What are your likes and dislikes? Taxes? Laws? Let me know. I'd be curious. But until then, I'm going to catch you on the next one.